Welcome to Legal Meets, a look at legal beyond the law, a podcast by Legaler. On this episode of Legal Meets, we meet Dr. Roland Vogl, a lawyer, scholar, and media entrepreneur responsible for Stanford University's Codex program, a joint collaboration between the law school and computer science department. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Legal Meets. I'm joined by Roland Vogl at Stanford University. Thanks for joining us, Roland.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming, so you're a very, very busy man, so thanks for making the time. And I just want to jump straight into asking you about the man who's away from, the Stanford kind of the busy, hectic lifestyle, and if TED Talks got in touch with you tomorrow and said, Roland, would love to have you on, and for you to talk to the masses. What would you talk about if it wasn't about legal or technology at Stanford?
Well, that's a tough one, because that takes up so much of my life. I think if I wasn't into legal technology, I would probably try to be a kind of documentary filmmaker or something like that. And I would also talk about the beautiful outdoors of California, which is where I like to take my family. And so I think that's what I enjoy the most outside of legal innovation.
So you get out. Obviously, there's a beautiful landscape in California. So you get out hiking and in the outdoors a lot.
Beach, yes. Lake Tahoe, skiing. It's, I think, one of the best places in the world to live in.
Ah, fantastic. And so what initially brought you to the Valley? Obviously, the lure of hiking and skiing and everything else sounds very good. But what initially drew you into Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Austria, and hiking and skiing there is also pretty good. So really what brought me here was Stanford. I was applying for the master's program in international legal studies at Stanford Law School. I was a law clerk at the European Commission, and thought it would be great to work to study at a UK or US law school and get my master's. And somehow I got admitted at Stanford. Still don't know how that happened, but then kind of got stuck here in the Valley.
Okay. And what about being a lawyer? Was that something that was always on the radar? Like you made your way to obviously the mecca of technology and now legal being at Stanford. But was that always on the cards? Or was that something that kind of happened more organically?
It was. I mean, I certainly was toying as a kid, with becoming a police officer or a fireman. Also a doctor, but then I think pretty much from age 10 onwards, I thought, wow, that's kind of a cool profession if you can sort of stand up for other people, help them get justice, and also make a living doing that. That seems like a great profession. It just seemed very appealing to me, and so really pretty much from age 10 onwards, I wanted to learn about the law and become a lawyer.
Okay, cool. And so obviously you started that process in Austria, and then you worked in the US in Silicon Valley in a law firm. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I worked for Fenwick & West as a trademark lawyer and copyright lawyer.
And was that part of, I guess, being amongst all the tech companies and being in that realm as well with IP? Was that kind of a catalyst in any sense for the next steps in your career? Because obviously you've had some, what a lot of people don't know is that you've been involved in quite a few of your own startups. Obviously, you've helped a lot of other startups get to where they are today, but you've also lived the startup life yourself.
Yeah, Fenwick is very much a startup law firm, and I think one of the first startups they incorporated was Apple Computer in 1973.
It's not a bad one. Okay.
And I think they're still kicking themselves for not having taken any equity but instead charged them $500 for incorporating the company. But it's very much a company that law firm that does what the startups are kind of at the core of what the firm does, and the firm kind of grew up with many of their startups. I find the startup, sort of the process of like, coming up with a new way of doing things and trying to reinvent stuff kind of really appealing. And startups are the vehicle to bring new ideas to the marketplace, certainly here in the Valley. And I found myself very attracted to that. But it's also there's it's the startup hustle, and with all the ups and downs of that you know very well, I'm sure. And
all too well.
And I've certainly seen also the kind of the darker sides of the startup life, and and yeah, it's just kind of an ongoing learning experience still.
Awesome. So what were the actual startups that you were involved with yourself? Because there's a couple, there's been some exits and whatever else. So what were the actual ones that you kind of were working in?
So I was personally a founder of two startups. One which was a media platform for startups called Vader.tv. And the other one was Civics, which is the Stanford Intellectual Property Exchange, copyright technology that helps mostly universities manage their copyrights and the works they license for use at the university. And and then so those two startups I've been a co-founder and board member and served in different roles. And then there were a couple of startups that came from people that were kind of Codex staff members or fellows, and then those ideas for those startups were born here at Stanford, maybe through a research project here, and then they were spun off from Stanford as startups. And the first spin-off from Stanford was Lex Machina, that started as a research project. Mark Lemley is a very prominent patent scholar and empirical patent scholar, and he wanted to create a database that tracks all IP litigation in the country and tries to get empirical information out of the IP system, really to advance his research. And some people who were involved in Codex actually then helped build this database, and then there was an opening to bring this into the marketplace, and we spun it off, and it has actually several years later been acquired, actually 1 or 2 years ago, been acquired by LexisNexis. And then there were a bunch of companies that came from within the Codex ecosystem, where we had, maybe Stanford students or other friends of the center who, came to us with the idea early on and kind of used us a little bit as a sort of sounding board and a place to kind of, provide feedback and maybe some connections. And then they started their own startups, but they themselves sort of kept, in close communication and in a sort of a close collaboration with Codex as non-residential fellows. So we have a relationship with those people, those company founders. We are not we don't view ourselves as an incubator of their companies. They started their own companies, but we have a relationship with those entrepreneurial fellows.
Yeah, well,
examples of those would be Ravel and Ravel Law, and I would say, a bunch of other companies
like
that
Casetext and those guys, yeah.
Casetext, I think they were even. I mean, we have a relationship with the Casetext founders, and they're great friends. But they came up with a Casetext idea completely independently, and we had no involvement in that.
All right. Well, for listeners, maybe just put into context, obviously the Codex program, because from what you've described, it sounds like there's a perfect environment, like a backdrop of technology and a hotbed of VCs. Then you've got obviously lawyers, very smart guys coming into Stanford, and then there's the entrepreneurial kind of air about the place, and even for yourself, sounds like you always have the entrepreneurial bone in your body. So just explain for listeners what the actual Codex program is, and obviously you're involved.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question too. So we are a joint center between the Stanford Computer Science Department and the Stanford Law School. Our mission is to bring information technology to the legal system and make it more efficient for all stakeholders in the legal system. We have a kind of strong, kind of bias towards kind of access to justice. So we've kind of built in into our motto this kind of legal empowerment through information technology. And so yes, I think you're exactly right. I think Stanford has first of all, a very entrepreneurial and unique student body. We have a law school that's, that's kind of, changed itself, I guess, to become more open also to people from other departments, and to make it easier for students at the law school to take courses in other departments. And so there's like a lot of, should I say, like, facilitation of connections. And that's kind of also a little bit, what one of the unanticipated roles of Codex has become. So we started out as, this kind of interdisciplinary research center, but we saw maybe 5 years ago that there's a real demand to kind of bring the community together. There's people working on their own projects in their garages, and who didn't know like who's working on what, and they didn't know that other people also working on these interesting legal technology problems. And so we started kind of opening our doors, and we started creating these events, like a weekly group meeting, a monthly speaker series, a yearly big conference, our Codex Future Law Conference, to bring the community together. And now I would say that this community aspect around Codex has become really very important, and we're playing this kind of catalyzing function just by being a platform for people to engage in these conversations and bringing the stakeholders together, which is one of the roles that universities play. And I think Codex has started to play that role of like bringing the stakeholders together for this legal innovation community. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, does that seem that the catalyst for that has also been just the simple rise of legal technology? Obviously, as you said, it was quite siloed. It was quite sporadic in terms of getting funding and whatever else. I think from the outside, looks like Codex was early to a space that obviously needed a lot of, as you said, nurturing and connecting. But now it seems that the outside legal industry growing organically, and we'll also chat about the conference you guys have.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and it's just exploded, and it's sort of bigger than our most expectations, and so I don't think that we necessarily, I think that happened in tandem, maybe with our activities here, and we were not, we can't, unfortunately, can't claim,
synergy, right? It's kind of like happening on both sides, but obviously, I know from experience, again, it must have been 2015. We first heard about Codex through one of the alumni who worked on a legal tech project. Again, very nascent kind of thing, and legal tech was. I think the first thing I heard when I was at these conferences was, it's an echo chamber. Nothing actually really happens. And we had an option of a few different conferences, and Codex was one of them. And everyone was like, if you want to go to the real legal tech conference where the real stuff happens and the real talk. And the actual things that are computational law, AI, and all those kinds of things. Because again, even to like, if you hear AI every day now, but even 2 years ago, that was still kind of in the backwaters in some sense to the public, right, and to lawyers. And now it's like you got big projects like Ross, and it's becoming more and more commonplace. So I know for us, the combination of being on the hallowed grounds of Stanford, that's gives you a shot in the arm, and then obviously meeting people like yourself that are at the forefront and connecting all these amazing people and startups together. And I think the first keynote we saw there again just blew my mind, and I was like, wow, okay, so this is kind of where it all goes down. But yeah, so maybe tell our listeners about the actual conference you guys have, because that's really a meeting of the minds, and it's quite a special time of the year, and there's a lot of activity both around it and actually in the actual sessions. A lot of amazing stuff I think comes about afterwards. So yes, tell everyone about that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. You're very kind. So the Codex Future Law Conference, it's been in its 5th year this year, and we're gonna have our 6th event next April 5th. I can't tell you yet what we're gonna have on the program.
Yeah, what the agenda is.
Planning basis, but we certainly feel like it's grown dramatically. The audience has changed also from like really the kind of the hardcore, kind of early stage innovators and legal tech geeks, if you wish, to like a broader group of people from law firms, from large information companies, startups, government. So that's encouraging. So there's different groups now interested in these topics. And for us, it's a high stress event to produce. And I felt like this past year was, particularly good. And then every year we want to, do even better. So this, so that's just what comes with like producing conferences. But for us, it's also just a great way to just bring the community together and see where everyone's at, and that helps us. So we're very kind of fond of this relationship, the great relationships we have with the startup community, because we think so much interesting work is done by the startups, and it really helps us. It informs also our research, and so in a sense, I think in previous years, there has been a community of AI and law researchers for like 40, 50 years, right? And they've somewhat existed a little bit in their own kind of bubble. And then there were, some legal tech kind of corporate efforts, and Codex has views its role also in sort of kind of bridging those two communities a little bit, right? We're quite applied in our approach, and we want to be a bridge between the scholarly community and those startups in the trenches of legal technology.
Yeah.
But I just want to come back to one other thing you mentioned before about just Stanford, just the environment. That's also one thing that's very true about Stanford in general. It's just sort of this dense network of people around it who are always happy to meet with people with new ideas and connect them up to investors, to advisors, to industry experts, which I think this really helps kind of accelerate a lot of the innovation.
Yeah, it's very nurturing. It's a very nurturing environment, and again, like it's the first thing you feel when you walk in there. It's just a place for open thinking, and you think about all the people that have been there beforehand, and all the like you said, the success stories of just down the road. And so so I found that was quite compelling, where a lot of the fellows that work in Codex, a lot of the other Stanford kind of alumni are very there's a very open kind of dialogue and network to people helping each other, which is again it seems obvious, but it's quite rare in especially on that scale. So it's quite quite special.
I do think that it's I see a lot of new things happening, communities forming in different countries, and some law schools trying to take on this topic. So it's definitely, legal innovation is like becoming an important topic in many different countries. So it's awesome. A great time in this space. Yeah,
no, again, going back to the Codex conference, I remember we walked in, there was some telepresence, like robots kind of running around, and I might get his name wrong. Was it Oliver Goodfellow? Is it the professor?
Good enough.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, up there with his bow tie, I felt like I was in Goodwill Hunting or something, and it was just it was really talking about some really, really amazing concepts and really intelligent people. It was amazing. So yeah, I mean, with all that, again, you mentioned before, it was a lot of the more that the early adopter geeks kind of, at the conference, but now you've kind of, it's broadened the demographic to actual law firms, to, legal just enthusiasts and other corporates. With all of that talk of, being at the forefront of law with things like AI and whatever else, is there a increasing adoption that you're seeing by these companies? Like, they're obviously coming to these events to learn more, but I guess has the credit card come out in a sense? Like, do you feel like these companies are adopting and rolling out all of this technology, or is it speeding up the actual adoption of technology?
I think that's a great question too. I think the law firms are more receptive to new technologies and new ideas than ever before. I think they're feeling a lot of pressure. They're trying, all the law firms, and I introduce a lot of startups to friends at law firms, and I think there's a lot of openness to learning about new ways of delivering legal services and working with startups to do that. I think they're also a little bit overwhelmed because there's so many offerings in the marketplace right now, and how do you distinguish between e-discovery company A from e-discovery company B, and so that's a bit challenging. There's groups forming also, like the Clock group that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah, they got a lot of traction recently. Yeah.
Corporate Legal Council, or what is Clock?
I think
legal.
Well, the thing is, I think the corporates are in maybe a more unique position than some of the law firms, where the world around them has changed a lot more than some of the law firms, and they can actually possibly be a catalyst to draw in a lot of the actual law firms that they work with, because they've got a bit more, I guess, leeway from their CIOs and IT managers to actually use technology. So it seems like they're probably moving a little faster, right?
Yeah, they have. They're moving. Corporates are moving maybe faster. Yes, I think that's true. They have different decision-making processes than law firms. But they are also, I think, like you said, they also have, that's one avenue that a lot of legal tech startups are taking, to work with the corporates and then use the corporates as the corporate legal departments as leverage to bring on board the outside lawyers.
Yeah, awesome. So you're in a unique position. You've got law students who are obviously the next generation of lawyers.
You've also got legal tech companies on one side that are, the future of how lawyers are going to be adopting technology and rendering their work. So some might say, hey, well, okay, on one side, the jobs are getting eaten up. On the other side, you've got law students coming out. There was a few, I know locally in Australia, there's a few statistics that were quite daunting initially, where around the time of the GFC, which Australia was quite sheltered from, then the economy wasn't as affected in Australia. There was approximately 10,000 graduates with about 7,500 job placements. So there's a small gap, but obviously not everyone coming out of law school was going to become a lawyer, and so it was quite a natural, I guess, attrition rate. But then, fast forward, I think around 2015, the stats were about 13,000 graduating and only around 2,000 kind of placements. So there was already,
2,000 graduating and 2,000 placements.
Yeah, exactly. So there was quite a huge
gap. Again, that's just job
advertised and the placements that they have, obviously from certain data resources. So the accuracy, who knows? But it was done the same way. Obviously, in 2008 was the previous one that saw the initial drop. So again, it seemed like maybe law firms were more. It wasn't so much technology; it was more law firms kind of changing their business model and hiring practices and tightening the belts a little bit. But again, going back to kind of the law students that are coming out of law school right now, what would your advice be to them, given the landscape, talk of jobs getting replaced, automation? Naturally, you'd hope that they're the ones that are going to adopt more technology and be better lawyers and potentially even more jobs. But what's your take and what's your advice to that law student who's kind of in his second year at Stanford, kind of trying to decide what their future job's going to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So also in the US, enrollment in law schools has dipped after the recession. It has recovered some, but I don't think it's still back to sort of pre-recession levels. I would say yes, law firms are maybe like hiring fewer people. I would also say that automation and in the legal space will not completely disintermediate the legal profession. I think there'll be lawyers here for the for our lifetimes. I'm pretty sure we'll have lawyers.
Yep.
But I do think that this next generation of lawyers will have to really use technology in new ways in terms of delivering legal services. I think they have hours going to go away ultimately, and it might still, in certain areas of very bespoke services, might still be be viable for several decades to come, I suppose. But for most other services, really legal services that are kind of standardized and repeat, it will be more kind of lawyers will offer packages of services, and for that, you have to really think about how do you create those systems that make those services available to as many people as possible at affordable rates. And so you will use computer systems and AI to do that. And those systems will know at what point a matter needs to be kind of, at what point you take it out of the workflow and escalate it up to a human lawyer, right? And he can then add his human expertise. So I think that's the one thing I would say. I will also say that I think the more progressive law firms who've been thinking a lot about what's the role of the lawyer in the future, they're thinking of the role more not as sort of the people who write a legal opinion, but more as the people who, almost like management consultants, go into their client's business, figure out their legal needs, and set up legal processes that may leverage legal technology companies, or may outsource certain legal processes to legal process outsourcers and that sort of thing, to come up with like a solution for their clients. And they have to, so lawyers of the future will have to be much more kind of in tune with like the real business realities of their clients, and then come up with like holistic solutions for their clients. And so for law students, that means that we'll have to teach them about those technologies, and also have them be conversant in sort of business terms, and not just in creating like legal memos. I think for at Stanford, I think we have two different. If you look at the student body here, I think we have maybe about 20% of the kind of the law students who are real innovators, who want to kind of redefine a whole process, right, and create a new system to do that, and they have the skills to do that. And then we have 80% of the students who might want to go into a more traditional legal role, but they need to be conversant and understanding of like the technological means it will take to deliver the legal service. So in the future, it will likely be malpractice if you don't leverage some of those big data analytics systems to help your client, right? If the other party is using these kind of data analytics tools to inform their clients' strategies, if you don't use that, there's a legitimate question if you're committing malpractice.
Okay, Roland, you mentioned that the law student of the future is going to be leveraging automation processes, systems, and data analytics platforms to be a more creative strategist, and hopefully have a firmer grip on the commercial aspects of business. So obviously they can do what they're good at, and that's offer be an advocate and offer advice. But do you see coding being a part of that? Is a lawyer walking away from Stanford or another law school necessarily coding? Is that a necessity, or is it just a nice to have, or is there another area they should focus on?
I think it's a nice to have, but not a necessity. We have students that are taking computer science courses and they learn how to code. Certainly puts them in a better decision to kind of speak with computer scientists, as they might be teaming up with them to build new systems that deliver legal services. But I don't think it's a must. I think what we need to teach our law students is to be, to think like engineers, and that doesn't require them to be full stack developers, but they need to learn to think like engineers and learn how to sort of break down the service they provide into its subcomponents, figure out which ones can be handled by technology or enhanced by technology, and which ones need to be reserved for their own human kind of judgment and expertise, and then bringing it all together into a kind of compelling package that of legal service and legal advice that is affordable to consumers. And I think that's what we need to learn our law students. And then once they figure out how to do that, they will, I think, be fairly
well equipped,
successful and satisfied with their role as lawyers in the future.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it could almost be a case of malpractice if you're not, leveraging these systems. There'll be almost a par for the course in terms of minimum requirements to actually service a client. And technology, there's a lot of bar associations I've seen, especially in the US, that are now making technology a prerequisite, a certain base knowledge. So that's interesting also.
That's a great point too. Some state bars are requiring technology training now for lawyers, and I think that's a growing trend. And lawyers that don't, they won't be able to use those technologies in the future, might be putting their clients at a disadvantage, even to the degree that that it might ultimately be viewed as malpractice.
Yeah, awesome. So you got your crystal ball there in your office. What's the next 5 years of legal tech going to do to law firms and lawyers? What's going to be the biggest change that these lawyers and law firms are going to see in the next 5 years?
Well, I think one is there'll be much more. Platforms will be used to work with clients, like your platform. There will be platforms will be used to be matched with the right clients, to make the perfect match between the right client with the right lawyer, and there will be AI enhanced kind of matchmaking services, I think, out there, and it will be more and more normal for a client to find a lawyer online. I think that's definitely coming, but also in sort of the content of the legal services that are provided. I think the use of data and data analytics will play an ever more important role, and this will come. We've seen it. IP was one of the early areas where big data analytics has started to play an important role, and but this is coming to many other areas of legal practice. And talking to a lot of people who are from the very kind of niche areas of the law, they're seeing new kind of opportunities in bringing machine learning and data analytics to those areas. And I think that will become more and more the norm in the future. Okay,
Roland, a couple of parting shots before we let you go. Just a couple quick fire questions. Are you an Android, Windows, or iOS user?
iOS.
iOS. And does that lead into the iPad and the MacBook and everything else?
MacBook, yes.
Yeah.
No iPad.
What I noticed when I first walked into Codex was increasingly the number of, as you said, the legal techies were on MacBooks, which was a big change from the past, right? It was always Windows, Outlook, and Word. So it's interesting to see now with mobile apps, I think people are moving into the ecosystem and lawyers using, Apple Watches and everything else. So it's going to be interesting to see what technology comes next with Google Glass and if that's going to go into the courtroom or augmented reality. So it's very interesting. But is there any other bit of technology that you can't live without? Is there anything else that's a big part of your life?
Good question. No, not that I could
think of any. You haven't got your Tesla, you haven't got your Tesla yet, driving around Silicon Valley. Is that?
Say again.
You haven't got your Tesla, driving around Silicon Valley. Is that kind of?
I wish I had a Tesla, but you see more Teslas here now than Toyota Priuses now. So the company is definitely on a good trajectory here. And you see more and more self-driving cars here, and so I think that's one of the nice things about living in Palo Alto is that you get a sort of glimpse at the future, and this is coming. I think that's an exciting future. I would want all cars to be electric, and I also look forward to the days of self-driving mobility.
You almost get immune to it. I think I remember first trip to Silicon Valley. Again, you walk into cafes and kind of cool gadgets and things, and charging stations for cars, and then you go back home and it's like, oh wow, okay, I feel like you come out of a time warp. But you're probably used to all of that. But is there anything else that's a big part of your, I guess, your routine or productivity, or something that just keeps you sane? Is there something that you do on a daily basis that kind of gets you in and out of those doors at Codex?
Oh, that's a good question. So I've been trying to stay somewhat fit, trying to do more yoga, and just started doing some meditation with some mindfulness, just to kind of stay somewhat sane and not get drowned by the noise.
Is that transcendental meditation, or?
It's just I think it's just the mindfulness short kind of videos. I've started, and that's just the last couple of days because I felt like, I need to kind of be able to focus.
Just wind down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I better let you go, and it's evening time in the valley, so I'm going to let you go and get some rest and maybe meditate and relax, or go home and have a hot dinner. But it's been wonderful talking to you, and thanks so much for again sharing the insights from within the Stanford and the Codex corridors, and look forward to seeing you there for the next Future Law conference on April 5th. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again.
I look forward to having you here. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, Steve. I really appreciate it.
No worries. We'll talk again soon. Thanks, Roland.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much.